As we're all friends here, I'd like to give you a helpful piece of real estate advice. If you are considering buying a house in which a dream demon stalked, tormented, and eventually killed the previous occupants, might be time to check Zillow again, or at the very least let your agent know you are not interested. Unfortunately, in 1985's A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge, these folks that bought 1428 Elm Street did not do their homework. So let's talk about it. Now, as a kid, I have to say I was extremely disappointed that Heather Langenkamp wouldn't be reprising her role of Nancy Thompson for the sequel. She's very easy on the eyes. She's fantastic in the role. She's the perfect hero that you want fighting your bad guy at the end. And I thought she did so well in part one. She was really the strongest point of that movie, aside from obviously the villain. For whatever reason, she didn't come back to Freddy's Revenge, but we do have Jesse. Now, Jesse's the young man whose family has recently bought 1428 Elm Street and have decided to move in. This movie starts off in the center of one of his nightmares. He's on a bus, which is a nightmare situation for anybody that had to go to high school, and they are on their way back home from school, dropping kids off just like you would in any other bus ride. Gets to a point where it's just Jesse and a couple of girls catty-corner to him, snickering at him, making fun of his appearance. And then that bus decides to just hop a curb, drive off into the middle of nowhere.
Driver, that was my stop!
Now, you know at that point you're in a nightmare because the earth around the bus starts to fall out, and before you know it, that bus is suspended in the air by two different pillars of stone. Freddy's done all the driving he plans to for the evening, so he gets up out of his seat and scares the bejesus out of these kids. Now, as he walks towards them, the sound of those claws on the metal, obviously that's irritating, that's legendary, but when he's cutting through the bus fabric as he's approaching them, I thought that was extremely unsettling, that sound or knowing what's coming towards you, the example of how sharp those things are. I thought it was really a good way of building the tension for the scene. This is where Jesse wakes up in Nancy's old room on Elm Street, and we meet his mom, his dad, and his little sister, who, for those of you who don't know, is played by Christy Clark, who also happened to be Carrie Brady on Days of Our Lives, for those of us who had to sit through their grandmother's shows. Now, we've got a great cast here in Freddy's Revenge. Jesse, our lead character, is fantastic. Lisa is his girlfriend. She also plays a very vital role in the movie moving forward. But for me, the best role in this film, the best character is Grady, played by 80s mainstay Robert Russler. We know him from Weird Science and several other movies in that era. He is sometimes Jesse's friend. He is sometimes Jesse's enemy. He's also the person who decides to educate Jesse on the history of the house that Jesse now calls home. Keep in mind, Jesse had to know something goofy was going on with this house. I mean, it's got bars over all the windows. That's not something you see every day. But I guess he decided not to ask any questions. We get to the point of the film where Lisa is helping Jesse unpack his bedroom, and she happens upon Nancy Thompson's diary, which has been stashed in the top shelf of the closet.
Nancy Thompson, 1428 Elm Street.
Naturally, she goes ahead and decides to read it, and aside from a few inappropriate passages about Glenn undressing, we get to the point where Nancy is describing her nightmares, and more specifically, the guy terrorizing her in them. Jesse reads this and realizes that's exactly the same person he's been seeing in his nightmares. The theme of Freddy's Revenge seems to be Freddy wants to possess Jesse's body, which is a scary and innovative idea for this franchise. However, that doesn't explain how Freddy has these supernatural abilities here in the real world. Like, when the coach catches Jesse at the gay bar and he's got him back at the school running laps, how is Freddy able to pelt the coach with sporting goods while Jesse's running those laps? And more importantly, how is he able to control the jump ropes that wrap themselves around the coach's wrists and string him up in the shower? Don't get me wrong, the scene in the shower where Jesse disappears behind the steam and then Freddy reemerges from the steam was one of the most terrifying and gruesome scenes that I remember watching when I was a kid. It was very, very visceral, very effective. No. We get to the point in the movie where we're at Lisa's party and all hell breaks loose. Now, Jesse just wants to be a normal kid. He's going through hell. He knows something's going on. He knows the coach is dead. He knows he has something to do with it. He can't figure out any of it. But he's just trying to be a kid at this party. He's making out with his girlfriend in the cabana, and one thing leads to another, and Freddy decides to interject with his creepy tongue draped all over this girl's chest. Freaked out by the situation, as anybody normally rightfully would be, Jesse decides to climb into Grady's room and shack up with him for the evening. If by some sliver of a chance you as a horror fan have never seen the scene in Grady's room where Grady ends up getting killed, you have got to, at the very least, watch that portion of this movie. Same setup as a lot of the Nightmare movies. We've got one guy standing guard while the other one tries to get some sleep. Guy getting some sleep says, if you see anything out of the ordinary, wake me up, hit me over the head, do whatever you have to do, pull me back out of my nightmare. Grady doesn't believe any of this nonsense that Jesse's spewing. He decides once Jesse goes to bed, I'm going to bed. That's when it happens. We get Jesse screaming that this is happening again. He's coming back. He screams at the top of his lungs. We see an eyeball in the back of his throat, which I thought was a really cool visual. And then we see Freddy essentially birthed out of Jesse, descend upon Grady, and kill him violently with his parents trying to get to him on the other side of the bedroom door. Very, very scary scene. Awesome. Really well done. So the poolside massacre that follows is scary. It's unique because it's Freddy out in the open, surrounded by kids in the real world. But this turns into another one of those really goofy endings. You know, the movie itself as a sequel stands alone. I thought they did a really good job of separating this story from Nancy's story. Almost as if they decided to do a Freddy anthology series. It would be a perfect standalone movie. But they go back to the goofy endings, and we get Lisa pursuing Freddy, trying to get Jesse back out of him. They're led off to a manufacturing plant of some sort where Freddy apparently used to work, and we've got dogs with human faces, we've got deformed rats, and even more deformed cats. And now we've got some more of the whole I don't believe in you, I'm not afraid of you, you have no power over me sort of thing. And that's eventually what takes Freddy down in this one, much like it did in the first one. I get it, it's a movie. You've got to think of creative ways to beat this guy. I just feel like if that were me, I'd have been carved into cutlets shortly thereafter. I mean, it's not going to work out. So for me, this movie ages gracefully. I gave it a 7 out of 10. I think Robert Englund is tremendous in this movie. He's terrifying. And I don't think you can adequately explain to somebody who wasn't brought up in the 80s what Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger meant to the 80s. He was pop culture. I mean, he was one of the all-time villains. He was so good. And he's great in this franchise for the duration of it. There's a couple of stinkers that we'll get to. But as far as this movie goes, he carries this movie on his back. Tremendous outing, tremendous return to Elm Street. And that's all we've got for today from Aging Gracefully. I'm Matthew Essex. I'll see you on the other side.